Hello everybody, we are continuing the story of Alice from Just Alice TV show. And last time we stopped on this point when basically Alice met her ex after 7 years since he ran away from Alice in Cartagena, Colombia. They reunited at this community center because Alice basically went to complete her volunteer hours to get out of the trouble with police after a car accident. After basically an incident with police, she was basically offered to go to do volunteer hours, so this way she basically can get rid of any record, any criminal record, to pursue her job, and basically her job related to assisting a politician who is running for president. So basically she couldn't resist Pablo, and they kissed after 7 years since he basically left her. She still feels something. She still feels that basically nothing really has changed since that point. But now basically Pablo is a priest, which is changing a lot because after basically Cartagena, Colombia, he went to his church and he became a priest. So basically Pablo studied at a Catholic school. He was an altar boy, and after spending that night with Alice 7 years ago, he left her next morning without saying goodbye, and he basically was consecrated to the church. So 7 years later, she is working at his community center, and Pablo is in charge of this community center, and basically he is confronting her to get to know if she still has something for him, and that the basically relationship can possibly get on track again after 7 years. But she is already married to Alejo, a writer who basically lives double lives as well. But his life basically is not about dating two different women at the same time. His double life is about his career, which is just, making him live in the US and in Colombia, and just changing sides and going back and forth to US. So he is traveling a lot, but this basically career of her husband particularly contributed to her choice to pursue two men, because while basically she is in Colombia, she is with Pablo, but once she comes back to the US, she is with Alejo, and this is her double life, and she keeps basically in the dark both men about her double relationship. And basically her friend Susanna kind of, telling her that this is not really good. At some point the truth is gonna be revealed and you just will end up losing both men, Pablo and Alejo, because of basically her experience with Pablo 7 years ago. Her friend basically sees this reunion with Pablo as just the same mistake she did basically 7 years ago. But basically, she had to complete those volunteer hours no matter what. That was her primarily initial intention behind coming to that community center. But since she already ran into Pablo, they, got into another situation when Pablo confronted Alice and tried to make it up with her and tried to explain why he left her 7 years ago basically. And it worked because basically she was about to forgive him, and after he explained everything, she basically revealed him some really big news for Pablo, because it turns out that basically 7 years ago when he left her, after that night, basically Alice became pregnant and she had to deal with that baby alone. And she didn't give birth to that baby. So Pablo didn't basically become a father, even though he was really oblivious about anything basically that happened to Alice. He's still basically able to make her change her mind, and basically they got together again after 7 years, and after she is already married to Alejo, basically she is getting into the same relationship which caused her a lot of basically pain 7 years ago. And she came back basically to Alejo after spending night at Pablo's. And basically he was surprised that she basically came back wearing clothes basically that she usually doesn't. She basically explained that this is just a heavy rain, and basically her clothes just soaked, and she was basically forced to get some clothes from her friend, which is Susanna. Basically this is Susanna's clothes, her friends. And at this point her basically husband didn't basically suspect anything unusual in Alice's behavior, because she basically shows up making some excuses and then she disappears again, and she basically telling the same story about her going to work on that campaign of her boss who is running for president. And basically Susanna, her best friend, is not only did she basically oppose the idea of Alice getting back with Pablo or dating two men simultaneously, but she hated the idea of motherhood in general because of her being into women contributes to her basically position on traditional family, on the motherhood. And she basically keeps criticizing her friends' choices. Like, for example, not only Alice, but other friend, Laura, who is about to basically get a surrogate mother for her future baby. And basically in this friend circle, everybody just, kind of contributing to the choice of others, but Alice basically comes off as the most, I would say, indecisive person, because she makes like two choices. She chooses basically two things, and she is not able to just choose a single thing, even when it comes to relationship or her work or her education. She basically pursues two things at the same time, while her friends basically they just kind of the opposite. They basically choose specific way to pursue relationship or career or something. So this is why their basically friendship is kind of not helping her in any way. She's getting even more criticized by her friends rather than getting help from them, And basically her life became even more double, I would say. Once she decided to pretend like she is working as a flight attendant to make basically this double life work perfectly, she decided to tell Pablo that she flies to the US because of her work as a flight attendant, and she needs to be on that plane so frequently. So this is not like something Pablo, would ever doubt, because she's supposed to be on that plane traveling, so she can pursue this double life, because for him basically she is a flight attendant, but for her husband Alejo, she is an assistant for maybe a future president, the man who is running for that position. So she planned everything perfectly. She even bought this uniform of flight attendant uniform, and she's going basically to travel across Colombia just with her team, with the campaign that she is working on, and she's assisting that politician Marcelo. And basically this way she's able to keep in the dark both Alejo and Pablo about her double life, because once basically she takes off from the US, she is immediately changing everything, her look, everything, to keep basically this double life. And she's turning into this flight attendant, and she's basically arriving at Pablo's as a flight attendant, and he believes basically that she is actually working on one of those airlines of Colombia. And basically she pursues this double life because of her why choose mentality. She sees like if she likes two things at the same time, why not like get them both, which is of course contradicts to her friend's vision on what relationship is, or what like they see basically the initial relationship with Alejo is more basically suitable for Alice, but she sees basically Alejo as just another life in the US, and in Colombia she has this life with Pablo. So for her basically it works perfectly, because she even got 2 wedding rings from both men basically, because Pablo basically proposed to Alice, and she is already married to Alejo, and basically she accepted both to marry both, but she is already like 6 years in this marriage with Alejo, and despite basically that, she is accepting Pablo's proposal because he just resigned from his church. And this resignation means that basically he is not longer has to keep his relationship a secret. He is about to leave the church. He is not a priest anymore. And this means basically that he can live just a secular life. And basically he can be out with anybody without being judged or condemned. So this is why he makes this proposal to Alice, and she ran away because she wasn't really ready for that, but she will accept it. As I told you before, she will accept his proposal despite her 7 years marriage with her current husband Alejo, a writer. But keeping basically them both, that was basically initially planned, and while basically swapping 2 different men, 2 different marriages, and juggling just 2 different relationships, at some point she is supposed to basically fail or make some mistake. At some point it's gonna be something that one of those basically men will start basically suspect something unusual, or will notice something suspicious in her behavior, or if her inconsistency, basically, because you cannot just keep this double life working perfectly forever. At some point something is gonna be just spotting you on, because for example she wasn't ready for this call from her husband Alejo, who basically asked her if she basically at her boss's campaign right now, but she wasn't even aware of this event, because basically her boss organized some event without informing Alice, and everything is just public information. So basically her husband asked if she is right there, but she wasn't really there. She was with her another man, Pablo, and basically this way she was kind of forced to just, go and pretend like she was already working at that event, to keep basically her husband in the dark. And she was able basically to basically take this situation under control. But she is already kind of, shaking, and she is not able to perfectly sustain the pace of this, double life, because it's just too frequent swapping to different countries, swapping to different marriages, to different husbands, and to sustain that pace basically for just a single person to sustain that pace is just not possible. At some point she is gonna fail, and she feels like something is definitely getting out of control. And Pablo basically was detained after the protests basically that he organized, since he is basically in charge of that community service, community center. He usually basically does some activities like protests, and this basically got him jailed. But Alice basically was able to get him out of the jail, and due to basically her boss, because she asked him directly to release Pablo basically, but without revealing his and Alice's connection. She didn't basically tell that this is her another husband. And after that, basically, she came back to Alejo, because Alejo basically currently, he returned to Colombia, Bogota. And this became even more of a challenge for Alice, since now basically she has to swap to different men, to different marriages within the same city, not even fly into the other country, but she needs now to basically lead this double life inside of a Bogota, and which is even more challenging because you need to go to another man and pretend like you just at work, and to keep in the dark your initial husband, which is Alejo. And once basically she came back from Pablo after helping him get out of the jail, her husband basically, as a writer, he sees this story of Pablo as something interesting, and he basically is interested to get an interview from Pablo, which is just directly confronting Alice's secret double life and putting at risk her secret to be revealed. Because if basically her husband Alejo gets this interview with Pablo, he will potentially basically get to know and find out that basically she is involved with Pablo somehow, and even that they are married, that her basically wife leads this double life with another man who is basically a public figure right now, who got on this news. And so basically this setting some huge drama for next episodes, and we will get more videos on this TV show, Just Alice, once I complete the whole season, because right now it's just episode 5, and out of 20 episodes, we need to get at least 15, and the story basically is kind of interesting, and I'm not going to just rush it and skip some important information, because you need basically to get to know everything. And the double basically story is kind of unique narrative, which I'm gonna just really enjoy. So I see you next time, when basically I have more episodes, and we will basically make another stream tomorrow. Thank you. Goodbye.